Also, if you have any technical difficulties or have any questions throughout the session, please don't hesitate to write on the Q&A. We are here to help. And my colleague Anne-Marie is also here with me on that front. And now I suggest we delve straight into it. Yes, we're just waiting for a few more minutes, for a few more people to attend. Perfect. Welcome again. So we are very, very excited to see many of you today, and also to introduce the gender equality, the Target Gender Equality Initiative. That is the UN Global Compact initiative to prospective business participants. Maybe a little bit about me. My name is Salma Houerbi. I work at the UN Global Compact, where I'm currently leading the Target Gender Equality Program globally. What that means is I work with over 40 local networks all around the world who are actually implementing this initiative and localizing it within their own context. So if you join the program, and depending on which track you end up joining, you'll probably be seeing my face a few times, but you will also mostly be interacting with all my colleagues throughout the various local networks, as we really think of this initiative as global, but also extremely localized. So if you have any questions relevant to a particular context or track, you're always welcome to reach out to me. And we will also indicate the email address on the chat, but also to the relevant colleagues of the local networks where your business might be registered. So as previously mentioned, the focus of today's session is really to make sure that you understand everything there is about the Target Gender Equality Initiative to you as prospective participants. So what I'll do today is that I'll focus on explaining the context of this initiative and the rationale behind the Target Gender Equality Initiative. Then I will really delve into the very practical questions around the how, the who, the what, the when of this initiative. When is it taking place? How can you adhere? I'll try to answer all these questions. And then we will also, of course, have the opportunity to hear from a participant of a previous cohort, because I think it's always interesting to hear from me, but it's much more interesting to hear from a previous participant, to hear a bit about how they benefited from the initiative, what was the impact to date. And actually today we're very fortunate to have Giulia, who is a board member of Italian management consultancy named Operari, join us to talk to us about her experience as a member of the previous TGE, which is the abbreviation of Target Gender Equality cohort. But last but not least, we will definitely devote plenty of time in answering Q&A. So please, throughout the session, feel free to write down your questions in the Q&A, and I promise I will answer them, and I will look at the Q&A towards the end of the session. And if there's no time, or if there's any harder question, we will definitely follow up and address these by email. So please, again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to write them down. And again, as I mentioned, this session is really about making sure that you as prospective participant understand all the requirements behind the Target Gender Equality Initiative. Also, maybe worth flagging that there is an FAQ document that can be found on our webpage, and that we will also post in the chat right away. So before I get into the Target Gender Equality Initiative, I know there are a few of you who are not part of the Global Compact, and it is definitely a requirement to join the UN Global Compact to be part of this initiative. So I just wanted to stop and briefly introduce the UN Global Compact. So the UN Global Compact is an initiative that was created by Kofi Annan in the year 2000 to fill the bridge between the UN and the private sector. 20 years later, it is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative, with over 21,000 organizations committed or like part of the Global Compact. We also have presence in over 160 countries, represented via the various local networks that I was briefly mentioning earlier on. In order to join the UN Global Compact, the process is actually very simple, and you will find all the information that you need if you go to our webpage. It will be explained with a lot of details. You will have to look at the application guidelines, and the first thing that you might have to do is to draft a letter of commitment that commits your company to the principle of the UN Global Compact, which are principles around human rights, labor, environment, and anti-corruption. We also know that for some companies, it might take a bit of a while to get this process started, and you might want to join the Target Gender Equality in this round, which ends where recruitment ends end of May. If that's the case, please feel free to drop me an email, also via the Target Gender Equality email address, if your application is in progress and if you need any support in speeding up your membership in the Global Compact. So I was briefly talking about Kofi Annan and as the previous Secretary General, who's behind the idea of the UN Global Compact. But now I actually wanted to talk about the current Secretary General, who recently made a statement that gender equality is actually one of the biggest human rights challenge we face. And I have to say, I always find the first number, which is the number drawn by the World Economic Forum data, suggesting that it will take 268 years to close the economic gender gap. What does that mean? It means that neither us nor the future generation will get to see a world where we're actually equal. I think the data itself for us underlines the sense of urgency for both state actors, but also the private sector, to address the challenge of gender equality. And I mean, I think we are all maybe sort of familiar with some of these pervasive issues that dominate the economic, the world of work. For example, the fact that very few women have seats in boards, the fact that many women, or here we have the global data of around 38% of women who have experienced sexual harassment in the workplace. And every time I bring up this data around sexual harassment, I always say we always need to temper it down, because of course, that's only the data that we're able to collect. But we know that we anticipate that there's probably a lot more women who are not coming forward with these stories of harassment in the workplace. And then, of course, we know that women are still earning less than men. And here we also have the data, and that's data that I got from the Women Business in the Law report that talks about women earning 77 cents for every dollar a man makes. And of course, this data, it's important to mention that it might differ from a country to another. Of course, the context in India is different than the context in Japan, which is different than the context in Denmark, maybe. But we know that globally, women and marginalized groups in general continue facing discrimination at global scale. But now you might ask me, well, what's the private sector, role vis-a-vis this issue, and why should you, as business representatives, consider gender equality as relevant to your business activities? And I would say that there's increasingly more and more drivers that might incentivize companies like yourselves to consider gender equality. The first aspect is, of course, that we are seeing increasingly more and more stakeholders, from the bottom of the value chain, but also from the top of the value chain, paying attention to gender. We are seeing, for example, investors increasingly looking at gender disaggregated data and indicator as part of their ESG considerations. We've also noticed at the global level, consumers increasingly paying attention to these topics. So with that, we see that the reputational risk of not actually acting on these issues is increasingly getting higher and higher. The second aspect revolves around the evolving regulatory developments. We have seen more and more countries putting in place regulatory requirements pertaining to gender equality. And maybe I just want to mention a few of those. Some of you who are attending or operating in the European market might be familiar with the EU Equal Pay Directive, might also be familiar now with the EU Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive and how that aligns also with all human rights, including gender equality. But then we also know that many countries have set in place, for example, quota requirements, like here I'm thinking of India or the UK, when it comes to gender equality. And finally, as you know, there's also documented evidence that gender equality is simply good for business operation. And even more so, I would say, essential to drive corporate performance. And here I always like to bring up this data from McKinsey research from back in 2023, which estimates that achieving gender parity in the workplace could add as much as $12 trillion in the global economy. And of course, we are definitely familiar with the increased evidence of the impact of gender equality at the business level, at the company, in terms of, triggering innovation, enhancing corporate governance, and enhancing financial performance. So all these aspects, I think, converge together for the topic of gender equality to be relevant to businesses. So now going a little bit into the Target Gender Equality Program, where is it that this program come in? Well, I would say the Target Gender Equality Initiative is a response to this need from companies to systematically and comprehensively tackle gender equality related risks in their operation. What is it? It's a 10-month accelerator program which supports companies part of the UN Global Compact in setting and meeting ambitious gender equality targets. Here, we focus on two specific areas within gender equality. The first is around increasing representation of women in leadership, but also across all business operations. The second is focusing on equal pay for work of equal value. And maybe here, just to clarify, because I always get asked this question, what does it mean, equal pay for work of equal value? Well, equal pay for work of equal value basically means that even if it is not necessarily the same job, the idea is that men and women should not have too much of a high gender pay gap. So we're not necessarily looking at the same position, but also the industry itself. So basically, this is the idea of Target Gender Equality as an accelerator to support companies. But of course, it's important to highlight that this program is designed in harmony with other UN initiatives. And of course, converges with the SDGs, for example. And here, I'm thinking specifically of SDG 5 on gender equality. or SDG 8, which is the promotion of decent work and economic growth. The program is also designed in a way that aligns with the women empowerment principles of the UN Global Compact. And those are basically a set of principles that were developed by the UN Global Compact to put a gender lens to the principles that I had previously mentioned. So corruption, human rights, environment, and so and so. Where and when is TGE currently running? Well, TGE, which is Target Gender Equality Initiative, is currently, and for this cohort of 24-25, running in over 40 local networks. You can see here the various highlighted countries in red. And maybe also important to flag that we're currently in the recruitment phase. What does that mean? Meaning that you prospective companies interested to sign up for the program have until May 31st to register for this initiative. But I say this with a grain of salt because some local networks might actually have shorter deadlines, whereas other might have slightly longer deadlines, maybe going up to like the first or second week of June. But in all cases, if you're interested, I strongly encourage you to attend, to sign up as soon as possible. But then how about companies which are operating in countries where the program is not currently being rolled out at a local network? Here I'm thinking like, for example, Denmark, where I'm actually sitting. Well, there is also the opportunity to join the global track, which I would say translates to the rest of the world track. The track will be run in English, actually, but space is limited. So again, if you're interested in that track, please, you're always welcome to write to the email address, Target Gender Equality, that is probably written on the chat. And then I also wanted to highlight that for the Africa region, we have developed two tracks. One that is a Francophone Africa track, which basically brings together companies from Francophone Africa, and the delivery will be in French. And then we have also designed an Africa English track that brings together companies interested in the Africa specificities and will be run in English. The program will start towards end June. So by the end of June, participants will be receiving the welcome package and detailed information about the sessions and so and so. And it would end towards end of March, beginning of April, again, depending on the local network running Target Gender Equality. Who participated in the past? I get that question a lot. And I think looking at this, I can only say that it's a big mix of bag when it comes to companies. We've definitely had participation from multinational enterprises, but also large national companies. But we also notice that more and more SMEs are joining the Target Gender Equality. In terms of, appetite or general previous engagement on the topic of gender equality, we have had companies which joined the program with a sort of like demonstrated commitment to gender equality. They may have already signed the women empowerment principles that I have mentioned, or established a concrete policy and seeking to just fine-tune some of their existing policies around gender equality. But we also have companies which are completely new to the topic and are seeking to use the program as an opportunity to structure newly built efforts around this work stream in their organization. So the program, and I will get shortly a bit more into its content, is really built in a way that services the needs of different companies, be it companies interested in building a new foundation based on global good practice, or be it companies who are interested in fine-tuning, as I said, their existing policies based on good practice, or strengthening their gender KPIs. So now, going a little bit further into the substance of the program, what's the methodology? What does it look like? And what are the learning components within the Target Gender Equality Initiative? Just scrolling slowly here. Yes. So, as previously gathered, the Target Gender Equality Initiative is an accelerator program that helps companies with setting gender equality targets across their operation, with the focus on two key aspects: equal pay for work of equal value and strengthening gender and diversity across all business operations. So maybe worth mentioning that in general, the program is primarily run virtually, although I would like to flag that some local networks, depending on the track that you might join, may host some in-person events, but that will again be sort of finalized when you get your welcome package when you join the initiative. As you see here, the methodology really reflects the ambition of the initiative, which is really to help companies in a very concrete and actionable way and support them with practical tools to foster gender equality and set out action plans across their business operations. So it does that by means, I would say there's four key learning methodologies. The first is really the focus on capacity enhancements. And what we mean by that is really the more like theoretical knowledge and fundamentals around gender equality. And the focus here will definitely be on the tricky or complete, rather technical discussion around equal pay, but also other aspects such as intersectionality. How do you look at gender issues, diversity? But then beyond that, we also really focus a lot on performance analysis and action planning. And here, as I said, the purpose is really on concretely workshopping with participants using a tool which is called the WEB tool, which is basically a gap analysis tool, helping companies identify the gaps in a very holistic and systematic way when it comes to gender equality. And from that, the tool would support also scoping out what are the most salient issues and identify concrete opportunities and targets. Because we always get that question that, you might know that there are issues, but you're not necessarily, challenges that you would like to action as a goal, but you're not necessarily having a sense of where to start. Well, this approach really allows you to look at it from a very holistic and systematic approach and help you scope out, these are the various gaps, and this is where I might want to put my efforts. But of course, within the program, there's also the opportunity to learn from other businesses and share experiences. So we also put a big emphasis on peer learning, on sharing experiences, and collectively strategize on potential challenges and opportunities when it comes to gender equality. Looking a little bit more into this learning journey that Target Gender Equality is about, we would say that the program kicks off by making participants familiar with the foundational concepts and frameworks, including the women empowerment principles for those who have not signed them yet. And here, during the first module, participants will also get the opportunity to know each other. Then they engage in the performance or gap analysis by using the Women Empowerment Gender Gap Analysis tool. After that, in module 3, they will unpack and build on the work on the the Women Empowerment Principle tool results by identifying policies and practices that can be packaged into a holistic gender equality strategy. Afterwards, they're provided with the necessary guidance in order to draft ambitious yet realistic targets, as well as KPIs when it comes to gender equality. So this is basically the overall model. And again, maybe here also to share with you that this year we're also interesting because it's also a question we have kept on hearing from potential businesses. How does gender equality, or like how does this plan align with my broader plan? So we do want to have within the modules, there will be an opportunity to discuss how does this gender equality strategy fit in your broader reporting? And that will be done through a global expert session. But in general, each module will have various session formats. It could be expert presentations, which we call global sessions, followed by open Q&As. Could also be interactive sessions that are really like focusing on your specific track, which are adapted to the maturity level and building on each other's experiences in discussions. So who does or should be involved in the Target Gender Equality Initiative? Well, the requirement is that we often ask for the presence of 2 representatives, meaning that participating companies are asked to nominate 2 representatives to participate in the program on behalf of the company. In the previous round, also to share with you, many representatives were part of sustainability, diversity and inclusion, human resources, or comms teams, depending on the structure and the setup of your company. And here, the expectation from the representatives is that they join and they proactively engage in all sessions, including watching the on-demand videos and completing the homework. But the other requirement that we have, and again, this is really based on evidence, that high-level commitment to gender really helps mobilizing, and around the topic, and sets a sort of good precedent to mainstreaming the issue across all activities of a company. So for that, we definitely encourage the commitment of an ambassador who is a C-suite level representative or someone with a direct reporting line with the CEO. I mean, in smaller organizations, this often ends up being the CEO, him or herself. And here the expectation from the CEO is really to engage in the program, specifically to join the high-level welcome session that we organize as part of the onboarding, but also check in with representatives at key times throughout the program. For example, a good practice that we've identified is that after companies, take the women empowerment tool, they could, organize a workshop where, they present to the CEO the findings of this tool. And here you could have a discussion about where is it that focus on gender equality should take place. Of course, here we always encourage you to keep in mind, as we're talking about gender equality, it is important that we walk the talk. So here we strongly encourage you to keep in mind the diversity when it comes to the people nominated from your organization to join the Target Gender Equality Program. And when we think about diversity in terms of age, level, lived experience, and genders. So what has the Target Gender Equality achieved so far? And I think this is the most interesting part of the webinar, because I get asked that a lot, like, what are the outcomes from participating in the program? What happens, really concretely in company operations after they take part in the Target Gender Equality Initiative? And it's really very encouraging to see that 93% of the participants that have taken the Target Gender Equality Initiative are drafting new targets or updating their existing ones after completion of the program. Over 99% of them are actually filling action plan, and over 55% of them are setting out key performance indicators when it comes to gender equality. But we also know that target setting is definitely not a simple exercise within a business, and absolutely not a one-size-fits-all model. which is why it is not mandatory within the program to set the target. We do strongly encourage you to do so. And here I always get asked the question a lot, like, of what is a target when it comes to gender equality, and which target should I set? And here again, the answer is never straightforward. It will depend. It will depend on your sector. It will depend on your operational setup. It will depend on your strategic priority. But I do think that the good practice is always to think about setting these targets in line with, a global, a more sort of comprehensive approach of thinking about what are your salient issues and where is it that, there's the highest risk to your companies, but also risks to people when it comes to gender equality. Some companies may focus on setting a target, for example, and again, this always depends on context also. So maybe in a specific geography, you might want to focus on setting a target when it comes to the employment of women in a select function, or you might decide to focus on having a target that addresses the issue of equal pay. And you might also decide, different time frames within your target achievement based on the geographies where you're setting these targets. Others, might decide to embrace all of these above and integrate all of them in a broader human rights action plan. And again, there's no right or wrong here. It's really more about what makes sense to your organization and what is, of course, the most salient issue in terms of risk to people and risk to your business. And maybe just to give you a few examples on this, just some testimonial, from previous participating companies. The first is from the Spanish division of an eyewear company called Alain Flelou. So what Alain Flelou did is that they surveyed their customers. So they really started from had a very bottom approach, I would say, where they started by surveying their customers, asking them about which sustainability areas they would they should be focusing on. And they leveraged on over 12,000 responses to make the case to global management to make gender equality a core priority going forward. And this, again, really reiterates or emphasizes what I was talking about, that increasingly we see really stakeholder pressure from the investor side, but also from the consumer side to look and scrutinize gender equality. So what they did afterwards is that every country, they decided to really localize their strategy, where every country was now tasked with building its own KPI, which for the Spanish example included making sure that all workforce of all gender receive regular training around gender equality, diversity, and inclusion, also reducing the gender pay gap and increasing the share of women in leadership positions. Here, the other example I wanted to bring up, because I'm also conscious that we have many of you participating from different regions of the globe, is the example of an Indonesian microfinance company called Amarta. So Amarta, through the program, has gained increasing awareness of the importance of male allyship. So basically, the idea that it's not women only who should be concerned by the discussion around gender equality, but that males have a key role to play, because when we think of gender equality, we often think of power relations, and power relations, an inclusive society benefiting all genders per se. So based on that, the program was actually gave them concrete ideas on how to engage, assigned at birth men in discussions around gender equality. And what they did is that they instigated trainings and established, kicked off conversational spaces among the male colleagues on their roles vis-a-vis gender equality in the workplace. And they focused on the rural area offices, or local offices where located in rural areas. And I guess that was really interesting, very local discussions that then inform, HQ policy setting when it comes to gender equality. So I will soon be handing over to a previous cohort who will tell us also more about these learnings from engaging in the Target Gender Equality. But before I do that, I wanted to just highlight what does it mean? What does it mean? What do all these actions around gender equality mean for a business in reality? Well, it first means enhanced compliance with legal and regulatory requirements. And we really think that this is going to be picked up more and more. It also means it's a step further towards closing the gender gap. And here, when we're talking about the gender gap, we're talking about increased participation of women in the workplace. We're talking about, having in place grievance mechanisms in cases, for example, cases of sexual harassment. We're also talking about, engagement of all genders and allyship around these topics. And then, as I mentioned, we're also increasingly seeing that engaging in these topics and fulfilling or, taking part of this program also means that it's a step forward towards improving employee morale, enhancing talent acquisition, and also fostering an environment where there's innovation and creativity. So how can you sign up? Well, the sign up is really, I would say, pretty straightforward. To sign up, as I said, it is a requirement that you are part of the UN Global Compact. So you first have to join the UN Global Compact. Then you have to appoint 2 working level representatives and 1 high level ambassador. And then you have to complete the form, which is on the UN Global Compact webpage. And on this address right here that my colleague Anne-Marie has also pasted in the chat. And with that, I am really pleased to hand over to Giulia Denaro, who is a board member of Italian management consulting companies called Operari, and who was part of the TGE, the Target Gender Equality Initiative, in the 2002-2023 cohort. So Giulia will gladly share with us her insights, experience, and learning from the Target Gender Equality journey. Please feel free to write down all your questions to Giulia, and we will also make sure to take them or give her space to answer them towards the end as we take on the Q&A. Over to you, Giulia. I will stop sharing my screen.
Hi, everyone. So do I need to share a slide, or is it okay if I just...
I'm happy, actually, I can just share it for both.
Okay.
Yes, because I have it. There.
Okay.
Do you see it?
Yes.
Perfect.
Perfect. So hi, everyone. I am Giulia, and I am a board member of Operari. We are a very small consulting firm based in Milan, Italy, as we have around 12 employees at the moment. So what we do is that we support businesses to embrace transformational governance, aiming to adopt an ethical and values-based approach to culture and leadership. We both support businesses on a compliance side, so compliance requirements for local and international laws and legislations, but also help them engage with voluntary disclosures and develop strategies to improve their positive impact, as well as trying to reduce their negative impact. Of course, everything revolving their governance. We are a B Corp and also a benefit corporation. We have been a Target Gender Equality participant as previously mentioned in 2022, and we have been WEP's annual Global Compact signatories since 2020. So our knowledge previously joining the Target Gender Equality Initiative, I have to say we were not very researched on the topic, but we like to look around and just get be better within our own governance as well. So, as mentioned before, we have been signatories of the Women Empowerment Principles since 2020. Since then, we have tried always to work around the WEP gender gap analysis tool, which is a tool that we use on a yearly basis to track our gender equality performance within our workplace, marketplace, and community. In 2022, we certified with the UNI PDR 125, which is a certification that just has been approved on a local basis in Italy, which defines the guidelines on the management system for gender equality, which has provided us for structuring and adopting a set of KPIs that now have helped us develop gender equality policies. As mentioned before, these KPIs have been monitored and are closely watched and shared on a yearly basis. The certification has helped us to develop our human resources policy, parenthood policy, and gender equality policy. All these policies have a common thread, which is our remote work initiative, which we have been implementing since 2017, since it was even advertised or known, especially in Italy. So this initiative is a way for us to address challenges that exist in the consulting sector, especially, such as, such as long commutes to clients and long hours in the office. I don't have the slides, but it's fine.
Yes, sorry, we're just figuring out quick something, Julia,
It's all
but
right.
feel free to carry on.
It's all right. So as I mentioned before, the certification has prompted us to think more broadly about our business module and helped us to finally make the decision to start the transition from services to products. So 1 year from our initial certification, we have been recertified with full marks by an external auditor. And this policy system is supported by a communication strategy and also a strategy within and setting targets within our business. One example of an initiative that we started with this policy is the program of our Domo social initiative. Domo is a house that we have in Sardinia, where the CEO has in Sardinia, and decided to make available for all employees to use and also extend it to their families, offering both co-working and co-living solutions. So because we are trying to break down these stereotypes about the consulting sector, we recognize that the employees need a place to reconcile personal and professional life, especially after the school year is over, where there's a huge issue for working parents to reconcile both work and personal life. And so we believe that this house, Domo, could be a way to achieve it. This initiative has won both regional and national awards and is one of the ways that we track our positive impact. Just a few weeks ago, before I came back to university, I was just there. I was just with some of my colleagues working on some projects, and it was a very nice way to spend my Easter break from university, I have to say. So we applied beforehand to participate to the local network of the Target Gender Equality in Italy in the first edition. However, the scope of the initiative was still very directed towards the larger companies. So the year later, we have been invited as a micro company to participate when the scope has been expanded. I can talk about how our experience a little bit with the web analysis tool. When we approached that at the start, I think it's important to mention that it is a little bit of a language barrier because, of course, the tool is in English. So for some of our colleagues and for people who approached at the start, the language barrier was a barrier to overcome at the start. But then what we encountered at the start mainly was the difficulty in understanding and interpreting questions surrounding our supply chain, because at the time we primarily delivered services. And so we did have a minimal supply chain, so we felt like we couldn't ignore some of the questions, but at the same time, we couldn't expand on them at the same time. But since then, we, as I said before, we're moving from services to products, at least trying to. And this experience and the tool itself has helped us to incorporate the questions and the feedback that we've been getting from the tool itself into developing our supply chain and distribution policy when we are trying to expand our business model. And we are going to focus the insights that we gather from the WEBs tool into this policy so that we can also help tracking it in the long period of time. Our key learnings from the TGE workshops. So when we participated, both me and my colleagues, what we all agreed on one specific thing. I feel like the whole experience was very valuable to us because just we really like to share and communicate our experiences and our initiative with other companies. So this was a perfect opportunity to do so, since it was a local track, so it was easier also to communicate. But more specifically, we really enjoyed and were really interested about the exploration of language and behavior biases and how they contribute to perpetuation of stereotypes and prejudice, especially towards women in business. So that was really explored in one of our local workshops. And so it was very interesting to see how language can reinforce gender stereotypes, as well as behaviors that can they are often informed by social norms and can have gender biases. So after we participated in this workshop, we made a point to kind of just share this information with our colleagues in the workplace. And I think the shift in awareness also from us and then to them has resonated particularly with my colleague, and is something that we are now very mindful on our day-to-day basis, I feel like. What we learned from a peer in another company, as mentioned before, I think taking part in an initiative like this is that it's the value, like we really engaged with the value of cross-company sharing, especially between small companies and larger companies. I feel like it's, on one hand, it's great to see the engagement of larger companies within these initiatives because, of course, it shows that a change has been made when big names, as the slide before showed, join initiative like this. But then I have to kind of represent the small companies, and it's so interesting to see how the sharing of these initiatives can influence and help both sides. I feel like small companies can gather insight on how to scale and measure on a more structured way initiative from larger companies, and larger companies on the other hand can be inspired by initiative or just experiences that small companies share as maybe not as structured or something. So that really struck out to us, and I think that's one of the main reasons why I would personally recommend joining the initiative. When we're looking ahead, so any action plans and initiatives. So as I mentioned before, we approved our parenthood policy, which is not a motherhood policy, but my colleagues wanted to make that a point, which is a policy for both mothers and fathers who are, we just got our first motherhood in the company. So that's why we developed the policy, since we didn't have one before. So it's really exciting to engage in this new experience as a company with us. So with this policy, we're revising targets and we're developing new plans on a yearly basis. We are particularly excited about our self-mentoring programs for new parents. It is a small initiative and it is within the business, but what we want to do is facilitate the exchange of experiences and support between new and seasoned parents within the companies, and trying to foster a supportive community that acknowledge and supports the challenges faced by working parents, especially in the consulting sector. And in addition to this, we are developing an education tool, which is our good governance board game, which is called Simply in the Box. Some of this little image in the slide is from the game. And we're very proud of this. It's our first product, and it's basically a way where we want to help companies learn about good governance practices, but through playing. So a good an extension of this game, a notable one related to gender equality in corporate setting. So we're expanding it just now, and it includes scenarios and modules that guide participants through understanding and integrating gender equality into different phases of company life. So with this, the whole company is taking part of developing these cards, and will be in the market soon, hopefully. But we're very excited about this game. How much time did we dedicate a week and or month to participate in Target Gender Equality? I feel like what was said before is very in line with what we experienced. Since we joined the local network, we also had in-person or online sessions. So it varied on a monthly basis how much time we spent on it. But I think 5 to 6 hours a month did sound correct. Due to some sessions in the local network being an afternoon long, just networking sessions, and then maybe the month after, not so much, and just maybe like more informative sessions. But I think on an average, 5 to 6 hours is what we spent. We were 2 people, so we kind of made a point of at least making sure that one of us was present at each meeting. And why would I recommend others to join the Target Gender Equality? I think I said it before, but I'll repeat it. It really helped us listen and share initiatives between companies. We're fans of advocacy, and we really enjoy when other companies are too. So anything that regards that, especially in this topic, which we are very fond of and we really care about, any opportunity that gives the chance to do that, we want to jump on board. So yeah, it's been extremely valuable to understand how businesses carry out different gender equality initiatives, regardless size and industry as well. I think those differences are the exact thing that made appreciate these experience. And also, lastly, it really helped us learn new ways that we can measure our gender equality progress, and also gave some food for thoughts for future initiatives and targets that we may want to implement in future years. So yeah.
Thank you, Julia, for this very comprehensive and super useful presentation, at least for me, as also someone who joined the Global Compact recently, and hearing a little bit more about your experience. I think there's few things that I find really interesting in what you said.
Yeah.
The first is really I think I never thought about it, that actually what you see it sort of as a strength from the company perspective side, that you have this mixed bag of companies, that you have SMEs, that you have maybe more startup, but you also have the much more established big names, and how that is a strength. I think it's definitely a strength, from my side also, as someone who's working on the topic, but definitely really interesting to think about those synergies, and also what can be shared among different types of enterprises. And I also really thought it was interesting, the emphasis that you had on the challenges with getting data on the supply chain. And I think in many ways that's also a good test, because this is where, you know, more and more efforts will have to be drawn in the future, I think, especially thinking of, again, the regulatory requirement side, and more, you know, looking at downstream and so and so. So I think it's also in that sense, maybe this exercise can help, or like could be useful in
Yeah,
starting,
definitely.
right? So and I think I agree. I think it's also really I think it's really, I mean, of course, companies, you know, you are be inclined, you know, to start in a certain way, and all companies, no, there's no one size fits all model, but it is definitely, you know, good practice to consider risks throughout the value chain, and not just, you know, be focusing on a select you know, pain point at the top. And these are also the discussions that I'm hoping we can also bring further in the new in the sort of new edition of the TGE. So really, like, thankful for your thoughts. And I don't know if there's any questions to you, Julia, in the chat, but I'm sure you can hang on with us for a little bit longer as we go through the Q&A. And if there's any questions for you, I'll hand over to you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. All right. And I think with that, I want to go straight into questions. So what I will do is that I will open the Q&A and look at, you know, maybe these are also some of the general questions we always get. And I think one of the general questions we always get is if there's a fee in order to join the Target Gender Equality Program. Well, the answer is no, not if you're part of the Global Compact. And this is a program that, you know, initiative that we offer to our members. I think I have to put a big disclaimer that some local networks might have some nominal fees, you know, to cover, you know, expenses for like local workshops and so and so, but they're really a minority, and it's and they're minimal. But if you have, you know, any specific question on that, if you would like clarification, you're always welcome to write me an email. Now I'm looking a little bit. I see the question of Hanella here, asking if companies can apply. Can small companies apply? We don't have employees, our team is contractor based. Yes, small companies can apply. And again, we always think it's always best to join these initiatives from the beginning. We're always, I mean, again, the whole idea and of the Target Gender Equality Initiative is that it is an initiative to help service the needs of companies when it comes to gender equality in the most meaningful and actionable way. So we're always we're always happy to also, you know, make exceptions, consider, you know, specific cases. So again, the requirements are, if you are part of the Global Compact, you're always welcome to write us an email, and we can see where the participation can fit. I had a question from Chris, not in Belgium and in the Netherlands. Actually, no, the program is rolled out in the Netherlands. And again, the accurate map is if you go on the website of Target Gender Equality of the UN Global Compact that my colleague Anne-Marie has pasted in the chat, you should be able to see the list of all the countries. And it is, I confirm that it is being rolled out in the Netherlands. Do you have a cap on employees? No, we do not have a cap on employees that a company should have before joining. And again, companies are always welcome to join as long as they're part of the Global Compact. And maybe on that, like we've also had the question before on whether it should be too representative. If you know, of course, if your company is very small and if you only have like limited capacity, we also make exceptions to tailor for the needs of the smaller enterprises when it comes to representation of one representative only. So again, you're always welcome to write to us or to the local chapter where you would like to partake the initiative to arrange these type of compromises. What other question? Belonging to participation. What does joining the program mean for a global company? You have mentioned about local networks and a global track. What would that mean that we join the global one? This is a fantastic question that we also get asked a lot. So, and here, what we often get from MNCs, and I think is that there might be an added value in, joining. So the key recommendation is that you might want to join, the network where your HQ is based. But sometimes if you're a big company, you might also have operations happening in, let's say, in another region, like that you might also be interested in joining. So it is completely possible to join from different tracks. You could decide, to join as HQ in the network, in the network where your HQ is based, and then have certain countries roll out the TGE at a more national level, depending on your strategy, and them joining different tracks. So that's a possibility. What we have also seen from some companies is that they might first join as HQ and then roll out, and then in the next round they might invite some subsidies of their enterprises to join the local networks. So in that sense, there's a lot of flexibility. But maybe what is key here to mention is that when I'm talking about the global track of the Target Gender Equality Initiative, I am basically referring to the track that is provided in English, and where our local network are not rolling out the Target Gender Equality program. So going a little bit back into this map that I've shown previously, just to for clarity purposes. Yeah, so let's say if a country is not rolling out the Target Gender Equality, like Denmark, but you have a Danish company who is interested in joining the Target Gender Equality program, then they're welcome to apply via the global track. So the global track will have companies from various nationalities who are speaking in English. And we're also in the process of setting out some regional tracks. So we will always, during the onboarding, if we see, relevance for another region, for example, a Scandinavian track, we might, encourage that Danish company to join that Scandinavian track. But these are all discussions that we have directly with the company, and as much as possible, try to fit the needs of the participant. Just going back to our FAQ slide here. Yes. Is it mandatory to have a representative at C-suite level? That's also a question I get quite a lot. And I would say the best answer to this is that it's really a good practice. We strongly encourage, having the mobilization of a C-level representative at the Target Gender Equality. And this is, again, really going back to the idea that gender equality is a topic that has to be sort of owned at the top, and that it has to be embraced at the top, because as Julia's mentioned in her presentation, it's, there's a lot of discussion that are opened when we're talking about gender equality. And I think showcasing that type of commitment from the top only helps creating, the safe environment for the discussion to take place. And that's why we view it as, a very good practice. But of course, if you're a small company, if you're 3 people, and you might have to be wearing several hats. So you're always welcome to write to us on this, and we can discuss based on the sort of specificities of your business. I cannot see the link that was shared. Maybe that's a question for Anne-Marie. I think Anne-Marie, she's pasted all the links in the chat. But also to reiterate, after this webinar, we will be sharing with you the recording. We will be sharing with you the slides, and also all relevant links. So rest reassured, Aggie, that you will be receiving all these links in my follow-up. Yes. There's the question around how do we make sure that the program is basically localized? And here, this is the key question, because as you mentioned, it's very important for this discussion, as much as possible, to be at a local level, because again, the context and the reality of gender equality in a country will very much differ from a country to another, and also from a business to another. And it's the interaction or the sort of intersection of these various environments that make the discussion unique. And the way we do it is really via the local live discussions. And that's why from the beginning, I had emphasized that the program is really localized, and that I am presenting, really the global dimension of our initiative, but it's definitely tweaked and contextualized in terms of content for each local network running it. And then how to join the initiative, as my company is not a member of the UN. That's a question of the UN Global Compact, a question from Lubna. I am interested to join on a personal level. Okay, so there's two dimensions to your question, Lubna. The first is whether individuals can join. Well, this initiative is primarily tailored to business participants. So we actually, the offering and the content that is within this initiative, we believe that it will service the need of businesses the most. And as I had mentioned, businesses, in order to join, they have to be part of the Global Compact. So Lubna, if that's something that your company, that's a road that your company is interested in taking, please get in touch with me. And I am happy to circulate, and to help you speed up the process of joining the UN Global Compact, so that you could qualify for this round that ends end of May for recruitment. But in terms of personal interest or learning opportunities when it comes to these topics, this program might not be best suited, but there are few learning opportunities. And here I'm also thinking about an e-learning on equal pay and gender equality that has been developed, that I'm also happy to circulate in the links that I will share with you later. We also have a question, how you're promoting gender equality, specifically including intersex and non-binary people. This is also a fantastic question. And I think the answer to that, because again, we're covering like various geographies, and as I mentioned from the beginning, the context is matters for these discussions. So what happens is that we really look at it. I think there's two entry points for this discussion. The first is, as I mentioned in the first module, where we go through the foundational aspects and module of gender equality. But then I would also say that a lot of the learning, that, has been taken, or even though it focuses potentially on women, can also be scaled up to cover all areas of diversity, including, of course, intersex, non-binary, but also LGBTQI+. So I think a lot of the learning that you would undertake in your Target Gender Equality journey would also be useful for tackling this discussion. And again, it also will vary according to, to your environment, to your context, and also to what you as a business want to achieve. So I would say that the learning that you get is broad enough to help you dictate where is it that you want to take it. And then also the third aspect to this is that there is a strong focus on intersectionality, meaning, the cross-cutting aspect, vulnerability dimension, that these groups are, of course, may be subject to discrimination in a very amplified way when various categories intersect, such as, disabilities, such as age, such as sex at birth, and so and so. And I think that's actually a useful lens also for talking about intersex and non-binary people. I hope I answered your question. Yes, could you please write again the email? Yes, I will. You will see it right away in my wrap-up slide. In which areas do you see barriers to gender equality policies? Are these barriers rooted in social, corporate culture, or do they stem from our upbringing and lie in the preparation of women and men to fulfill certain roles in society? Should we start changing the equal perception of women and men at an early stage of education? Thank you, Adam, for this very brilliant and complex question. I think, okay, I think the best answer to this is that it's really, it's a mixed match. I think it's everything that you're talking about, basically. So yes, of course, a lot of it is rooted in our upbringing and how, you know, we have socialized these roles in our culture. And that's the longer work. It takes, I mean, and I love how Julia, when she talked about the Target Gender Equality Initiative, you mentioned mostly the learning and unlearning. And I really like to think about it like that. There's within the Target Gender Equality Initiative, we are learning, but we're also unlearning a lot of, you know, biases or uncovering, you know, these discussion of how is it that our language affects our relations, for example. And I think there's that aspect as a whole, how we are socialized, but then there's also the dimension of how businesses are socialized. And again, I think it's the intersection of these two aspects. And if you put it in a local environment, that also adds a layer of complexity. And it is these layers of complexities that we are trying to address via the Target Gender Equality Initiative. I hope I answered your question. How can we report the specific initiatives taken? Well, first of all, you will definitely get, you know, a certification at the end. You're also, I mean, the Women Empowerment Principle, if you're joining the Women Empowerment Principle, there is a track, we're keeping track of which companies are actually adherent to these principles. And of course, you're always welcome to, you know, report on these aspects as part of your general reporting on these matters as a company. All registered representatives should attend the sessions at a time. Yes, we strongly encourage the participation of the representatives, especially the working level representatives at all sessions. But of course, you know, we're aware that there might be some challenges and we are to a certain extent flexible. But I would say that the requirement is that, especially for the mandatory sessions, and I did not really get into that, but some sessions are mandatory, others are not. And I'm happy when I share the brochure, you could see Aiza which ones are mandatory for all participants to attend. I think with that, I have covered all of your questions. Maybe just to add from, you know, the various questions we usually get asked, is the Women Empowerment Principle tool confidential and anonymous? Yes, absolutely. We might have some sessions, you know, where we look a bit into regional trends, but when we do that, we're only using non-disaggregated data. So we're never really mentioning names or any sort of confidential data. Is it mandatory to sign the Women Empowerment Principles or publicly set a target to join the Target Gender Equality Initiative? No, but you are very strongly encouraged to do so. And finally, when is the registration deadline? I had said it previously, May 31st, but in some countries, it might end up a bit earlier, a bit later, depending on the amount of applications received. So if you know you're interested, please sign up as soon as possible. And with that, I think I've addressed all of your questions and we are definitely close to time. So I will wrap it up now. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I really, really want to thank Julia for joining us and for sharing your insights. And I'm really pleased to also, you know, stay in touch on this topic and follow the Operari journey in gender equality. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you. And I really want to emphasize that I'll be sharing the recordings and the slides and all relevant links. And yeah, you're always welcome to reach out to this email written right here for any additional questions. Thank you again, and hopefully looking forward to working with many of you having many of you sign up for the Target Gender Equality Initiative. Have a great day.